frozen lending to individuals and instituted tough measures before anyone can access credit. Okay, so we're now speaking with Kevin Mutiso, who is the spokesperson of the Digital Lenders Association and the co-founder and CEO of Alternative Circle, which has developed a Kenyan mobile-based app, Shika, that enables individuals to access credit through their mobile. Sir, thank you for joining us. Karibu sana to our studios.
Thank you so much, Grace, for having me.
Okay, straight on to this report that indicate that lenders across a number of African countries have declined to disburse funds owing to the risks that are associated with COVID-19, you know, like people defaulting. So is this true? And I know I've said about people defaulting, but why?
Well, I think what matters is understanding how we look at risk. We lend to a very specific niche. We lend to the micro entrepreneur, the mama mboga, the car wash guy, you know, those people who have cash economies. Their trading cycles are between 7 and 30 days. And the challenge we have is that when we look 30 days into the future, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so how do we price that money? The second challenge we have is our financing. You know, we get money from banks, venture caps, and other big lending institutions who work on macros, macroeconomic situations. And for them, the uncertainty that's in the marketplace has caused them to be a bit scared. And furthermore, the regulatory framework in the ecosystem has been putting out policies that have been scaring investors and digital lenders alike. And so it's very difficult for us to say very difficult for us to give our investors a good reason to lend money out at this time. But we want to lend money out.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some, I believe, good news, especially for Kenyans. This too that we've mentioned in that intro that I read, Tala and Branch, sir, because the association says it will waive late repayment fees. This is as part of measures to support customers. Let's talk about that.
So if you think about our loan products, they're 7 to 30 days, right? And so normally we charge a late payment fee after that period. What we have recognized as digital lenders is that our customers are going through a really, really tough time. And what that means is that that late payment fee is going to be at the detriment of their business and their personal livelihoods. So what we decided as an association is let's waive those fees. Let's waive those late fees and find a way to help our customers survive. And so they can pay us back when they get money.
Okay, so if you could talk to us about the countries that have so far seen a spike in digital loans. Talk to us about that and also tell us why this is the case.
I think you meant spike in defaults.
Yes.
The reason we've seen a spike in defaults, and this is across the ecosystem, I don't think this is a digital lenders issue alone. I think it's happening in the banks as well. I think it's happening in the microfinance institutions as well. Two things. One is that sudden stop in revenue, and so cash flows are tied. It's a very interesting statistic. SMEs have 15 days of cash cover, and MSMEs have about 1 to 3 days of cash cover. So imagine if a sudden stop happens, you know, what happens to their loan repayments. The second thing that's happening is that uncertain regulatory framework. You know, suddenly we're told no CRB submissions, and then, you know, every day there's a new policy. What that does as well is when we're calculating risk, it makes it very difficult for us to then determine limits or allocations. So the challenge we're having is the customer is unable to pay and we're unable to lend money to them. So we're in a bit of between a rock and a hard place.
Indeed. You mentioned the CRB. Just talk to us more about how that directive that was given by President Uhuru Kenyatta will affect your business. I know you've mentioned it, but just expound on that.
First of all, I'd like to make something clear. The Credit Reference Bureau is a beautiful mechanism. What people may not know is that in the world, in the credit information sharing mechanism, we are number 4 in the world and number 1 in Africa. And so the credit information sharing mechanism is essential for the success of Kenya and Kenyans. Number 2, the Credit Reference Bureau is a list. We don't really blacklist. What we do is that Grace has taken a loan, She took it on the 1st of May. We say Grace has taken a loan on the 1st of May, and it's due on the 30th of May. And then on the 30th of May, the Credit Reference Bureau will ask, has Grace paid back? And then we'll say yes or no. And basically, it's a record of just your credit history. Now, how did it affect our businesses? For most of us, what we do is we try to not over-indebt our customer, right? And so the Credit Reference Bureau data tells us how many loans that you have at any given time, and we calculate your ability to repay off that. If we're unable to see that data, and if we're unable to submit that data, then even the other ecosystem players, such as the banks and the microfinance, also get greatly affected. So what it has done, it has added a lot of risk into the marketplace and has created this conundrum where we don't know how to lend, we don't know whether we should lend, but we want to keep our customers going and moving.
Now, I have to ask this question on defaults, massive, because we unfortunately expect massive defaulters. So talk to us about how you're preparing for that, because if in normal circumstances, if I would put it like that, people still default, then we can imagine how much more they will during this COVID-19 pandemics. Revenue streams have been lost and such things. So talk to us about how prepared you are for this default.
Well, first is we're not panicking. We believe that this will pass. We have the resilience as Kenyans. Let's not forget that we are one of the most resilient people on the continent and in the world. So I'm certain we'll survive this crisis. The second thing is that we're working with different arms of the ecosystem to find solutions that I mentioned earlier around how do we ensure that we get financing down to the people. We have certain ideas around working with banks and the regulatory framework for a guarantee scheme, for example. We've seen think tanks that have calculated that the ecosystem needs about 100 billion shillings split into two, where we have one which is holdovers, so sort of sending money to the SMEs and MSMEs, an amount that allows them to hold, at least stay alive during the crisis, and then another amount which will be a restart amount. So if your working capital requirement was 20,000 shillings, we then give you that 20,000 shillings to restart your business once the country's opened up. And so we're working on different initiatives like that. And another initiative is we're trying to have a consultative approach to the regulatory frameworks, ideas around regulating digital lenders. We think that a consultative approach at the end of this period will have a more robust digital lending ecosystem.
Indeed. Before we wrap up, let's talk about what the future holds for these apps, the digital lending apps, at least post-COVID-19, because this will end. We don't know when, but it will end. So what does the future hold for the apps?
Well, it depends on how this crisis is managed and how we cooperate and collaborate within the ecosystem. If we're unable to find financial solutions to cascade downwards to our customers, I predict that you're going to lose up to 2/3 of the digital lenders in the ecosystem. And on top of that, you're going to lose a couple of microfinance banks, because if you can't secure financing, you can't lend. And if you're in the business of lending, then you don't really have a business anymore. If we manage this well, I think we could come out with the #1 country in the world with credit information sharing mechanisms, digital loans, products. Right now, we only have the 30-day loan, but imagine if we could lend through a value chain for milk, for example, where instead of a farmer needing to go through a broker, they can go directly to the consumer. So they're different. It just depends on how we as an ecosystem work together. We must collaborate, and we must have a consultative approach around the regulatory framework that will manage digital lenders and the lending ecosystem in general.
Okay, I'm told we are completely out of time, but just in under a minute, let's get your closing remarks. And maybe you could talk to Kenyans, those who are in a position to at least pay. I don't know what you would tell them. Just talk to them. They're watching.
I think what I'd say to our customers is we are all in this together. I think this notion that there's a bad man and there's a good person, we are all in this together. We want you to be successful, and for you to be successful, we need to be successful. So let's collaborate. If you have funds that can pay your outstanding loans and not infringe on your current existence, on your livelihood, pay it. It'll help your score in the future, and we will appreciate those customers even more out post-COVID, and we'll have known who our real, genuine customers are, and we will take care of them after this crisis.
Indeed,
Thanks.
they have had you. I know a few. I believe they've had you, and they'll